Okay, so we're recording this. I will upload this as soon as we are done. And yeah, and then we will have and then you guys will be able to move on to your, anyway, work on the project after dinner. All right, let's look at, okay, so we're gonna come in here. I'm just gonna create a new project and we're going to call this movies. And so what we're going to do is we're going to have a list of different movies, and as we click on them and select them, a different part of the page will display more detailed information about those movies. So it'll have like a bunch of movie titles, and we'll click on them, and then it will display all of those different, anyway, it'll display the details. And so they call this a list detail view. And yeah, just about to screen share right now. Yep. So yeah, yeah. Okay. Yep. No, you're good. All right. So yeah, let me know if connection drops or anything. Okay. So we're just in an empty folder right now. I'm going to do a create React app. We're going to create a blank application, and then we're going to bring in Redux, and then yeah, we're going to go over a high level what Redux is and how it relates to React, and then we're going to talk through just some of the basic like the basic control flow and what this does for your application. So it does a lot of cool stuff. Redux is, yeah, so I guess right off the bat, the first thing to know is Redux is not married to React. You can use it with Angular, you could use it with other front-end things, you could use it you know, in any kind of an application setting. It does not have to be used with React. It was created with React in mind, but it was designed in a way that it can be used with anything. And so we have Redux that we bring in. We have React that allows us to build all the JSX components, things like that you worked with. And then we have a thing called React Redux, which allows us to join those two together. So first thing we're going to do, we're going to go create React app, and we're going to call this movies. All right, so it's going to go install all of our React stuff, and then once this is done, then we're going to install Redux and then React Redux. And then those two packages allow us to yeah, create the structure. So Redux it's an excellent way to manage large applications where components, you know, that are, you know, that could be like, you know, maybe one component is nested all the, like, you know, nested super deep on one side of the page, and then it has to communicate information to another nested component super deep on the other side of the page. So like, for example, if we go look at Amazon, you know, and then let's say, you know, here I'll go iPhones. All right, so here's some random phone. And if I go add to cart, then what you'll see is now this is going to mess up all the retargeting ads, and I'm going to see iPhone ads everywhere I go now. But so now you see that this got updated to a 2. And yeah, and so just different parts of the page, and then this like little side thing shows what's in the cart. There's different parts of the page that all kind of feed off that same information. So Redux is a way for us to manage the all of the state, all of the different all the information that our components need everywhere on our page right now, anywhere in our application to render it appropriately. Because if we were just doing React, it would get very, very complicated trying to pass information around to all the different components. And anyway, it's so Redux is the solution. Redux is how we make a more complicated, more sophisticated client-side application. All right, so our stuff should be finished now. Okay, so let's go clear, LS. All right, so here's movies. Let's go into movies, and here we go. So I'm going to go npmi -- save. I'm going to add in Redux and then React Redux. So those will go and add those to node modules and then add those to our package.json file. Okay, great. All right, so in our application, and let me All right, I'm going to do a share a whiteboard real quick. Okay. All right. So let's say that we have, so this right here would be our application data. And then over here we have all of our React components. So these are our components. And then this right here is React Redux, and it connects them both. It connects all three of them together. So an important thing to know is that when we're talking about state, so inside of our components, we have component state, we have this.setState. We also have application state right here with our Redux in our Redux application. Those are unrelated, though. So state in those two different contexts are two different things. State in terms of a component is, it's kind of like if you think of like a checkbox, like whether it's checked or whether it's not checked. It's the state of that specific component. This right here, this is the state of the entire application. This is, if you think of the Amazon example, this is there something in the shopping cart? And then what is in the shopping cart? This is, if you're on Twitter, this would have, the array of tweets that would have all the tweets that are going down the page. It would have profile information. This is the overall state of the application, all the information that the application needs. And then state right here, like the states that you have in the components are the, how it's rendered. It changes how it's rendered. So go ahead. Yeah, so this is React. Yep, and then this is Redux. All right, so you have Redux over here, React over here. Redux has state. Redux is a sorry, I'm trying to. Okay, so Redux is a is just one single object. So think of those as curly braces. So you have one single object, and then we'll have key value pairs on this one object. So it's this one giant object that controls the rest of the application. So that's an important distinction to know, or an important thing to understand, is that with Redux, it's one giant object that has a whole bunch of key value pairs on it, and then we can then take the specific pieces of that state object and feed it into our React right here. And so again, this down here, this is the React Redux library. It connects the two. So everything on the right, this is what you guys have been doing the last couple days. This is just all the React stuff. And now we're going to have this big object that has all of our application state, and then we're going to feed it into here. So kind of like how you had that file that had it had like some application, what did I call it? Application data, and it had like an array of tweet objects, and then it had an object that was like user profile information. So that file, you could almost kind of think of that as the state for the application. And different parts of it are being used in different places in the application. But yeah, it's just one giant object, and as we start playing around with it, that'll start to sink in. But again, it's just one big object, and then that object controls just all the data that gets fed into React. Okay, any questions? All right, so let's all right, so if I go and let's look at JSBin real quick. So in our application that we're going to make, we're going to have this, essentially this state object will be created behind the scenes, and it's going to have the active movie. And so this will be the movie that this will be the movie that gets selected, and then we're going to have a movies array. Okay, so in the movies array, we're just going to have a bunch of objects in it. that have stuff about movies, and so they'll all have a title property. And then what will happen is that as we click on, so what we're going to do is we're going to take this movies array, we're going to print it out onto the page, and then as we click on a movie, we're going to change which movie is the active movie, and then we're going to display more information about it. So in our title, so we'll have, all right, so we have, all right, so we got The Godfather, now we have Land Before Time, all right, and then someone call out a favorite movie. As everyone reaches for the mute button. All right, Lord of the Rings, and then said Fight Club. Great. It's, yeah, good movie. Yep, classic. Edward Norton. All right. Fight Club. Great. Okay. So, all right, so there's a bunch of random movies in here. And so then what we're going to be doing is these will all be displayed on the screen. Again, we click on one and it's going to set that, this active movie will then be set to that object that will have the, the right information in it. So, so we could see more of the info. So we could say runtime, and then, I don't know, I'm just throwing, random movie or numbers in here. 165. Nice. All right. Okay. So we'll have runtime, or we could have director, actor, there's a bunch of other different information that we won't see in the list that we see. We're just going to see the titles, and then we click on the title, and then we'll have a display next to it that will show all of the different, all the other different properties that are kind of hidden behind the scenes. So this is what the state of our application will look like. It's just going to be a big object that will have all this information on it. Okay, so within Redux. Okay, well let's go set up our Redux inside of our application. So let's go. Oh wait, I have not pulled it up yet. Okay, so let's go. Atom. All right, we'll popped it open over here. Okay, that is adjusted for a different screen size. Okay, and I gotta drop that down. Okay, great. So we'll get rid of this. All right. So, So here we are inside of our file. We have our src. Okay, we're gonna look at this index.js file. This is where we connect our React app into the DOM. We attach it to that root element. So get element by ID. So root, and again we see that element here in the index.html. Div ID root, that's where our React stuff gets connected in. So here in index.js, this is where we plug in all the Redux stuff. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to bring in, and again, a lot of the stuff in here, this is a little more of the just copy it for right now, and maybe don't focus on the specifics of this part as much. But we're going to bring in a provider component. And this is going to wrap our entire application. So this will wrap our entire application, and then this provider component will have a store property on it that will be that big object, the one that has movies on it, and then the active movie. Like that's our whole application object. So provider is a React component that we wrap app in, so we can get all this injected in properly. Okay, so we have that we bring in, and then the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to bring in import, and then we're going to go create store from Redux. Okay, so all right, now so create store. What create store is doing is that's a function that we use to use some other functions that we're going to write in just a minute to build out our state object. So we're going to come down here, and we're going to wrap app inside of providers. So you have provider, and then we're going to go. All right, and then this is going to kind of bark at that because we're gonna put the comma right there. Okay, so right here we have this provider component. We have app nested inside of it, and then here there's the provider component. It has a property on it called store. And then this is where we set the object. The object that we put in here is going to be the object that is that big state object for our whole application. This is where they get connected. This is where we bind those two together. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to pass in create store, which is that function that we have, and then we need to pass something in here. So what we're going to do is for each property on the store object, so I'm going to go back into the JS bin. So for each property, so active movie and movies, there's going to be a corresponding function that controls what the value is for that property. And so these functions, they control what value gets set to this property. And then as we update and change things in the application, we will call functions that will invoke them, so that way these properties will get updated. So we have functions that there will be a function for each one of these properties that will control what gets set here. So right now we need this, Godfather, Land Before Time, Lord of the Rings, Fight Club. We need this array of objects to get into our application somehow. This is how we get this into our store. We do not explicitly set what the state object is. We have a bunch of functions that we defined that set what each property will be. So we're going to set what the movies property will be and what the active movie property will be. So we call those functions reducers. Okay, so we're going to create a folder here. And so in reducers, we're going to create a new file. We're going to call it index.js. Okay, so inside of reducers, we're going to have two different reducer functions, and one for this movies key and one for the active movie key. If we had a bunch of keys on here, we'd have a bunch of other different reducer functions, but we're going to have one reducer function for each one of these keys. All right, so now if we come into, all right, so come in here. So index.js is going to bind together our reducers. So what we're going to do right now is I'm going to make reducers for the two reducers that we'll have. So we'll have movies. That's the first, the first value, and then we have active movie. And I'll call this one, I'm just going to do that so that way they stay the same as the properties on the object. I'm doing that just right now to keep that clear, as a naming convention. So movies right here, this will be the function that will control what the movies key has. Active movies will be the function that will control what active movies has. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to start with movies, the movies function. So here inside of movies, we're just going to, it's just the JavaScript function. So we're going to go export, default, and then what we're going to do is we're going to return our array of objects. So I'm actually going to go and copy that from JS bin. Okay, so right here we have this this array of objects. This is just a function that's returning an array of objects. That's all this is. All right, so okay, it's part of this is I just need to kind of write the code, and then you'll be able to go back in and look at it and analyze it, and go from there. So there's a lot of just new code that you got to see, and then I'll push this up as an example that you can use as a reference as well while you work on the homework. So all right, so we have our movies. And then right now we're going to go dive into index.js right here. So we're going to go import, combine reducers. So this is a function that we're going to get from Redux. And so we're going to use this to combine our different reducer functions. And we're going to go import movies reducer from movies. So our convention is to call that uppercase, use that uppercase. We're going to go const root reducer, so this is equal to combine reducers. So that's that function right there. And then we're going to pass in an object. Okay, so then this object right here will define what our state object will look like. So our state object will have an active movies property on it, and it'll have a movies property. So right now we're just worrying about the movies one. We'll come back later and do the active movie one. So right now we have movies, and we're going to set this equal to movies reducer. Okay. So when our application boots up, what it's going to do is it's going to grab all the different reducers, it's going to run them, and then it will grab their default values that they return, and then based off the default values they will return, it will build our state object. And then once the state object is built, it will then render all the React, and it will use that state object to pass information to the components that need it. So right here, so we call this index.js because if we go to this file right here, back in this index.js, what we can do is we can go import reducers from /reducers. So if you'll notice, I'm referencing a folder. Reducers is a folder, and I'm not putting a path on it. If you import from a folder, then by default, it will import the index.js file. So we'll go and find the index.js file, and it will import that. So we're going to import that thing that combines all of our reducers, and then we're going to pass it into here for our state. So, or for our store. So to create that big giant state object, we take all of our reducer functions, it's going to run all of those, create this big state object, and then that's what will influence the rest of our application. So I'm just going to keep going because once we start seeing stuff on the screen, and then we can kind of walk through some of the steps, I think that will anyway, I think that will make it work a little better. I think that will help your understanding a little better if we can kind of just, skip over a couple steps, or just keep moving, and then we'll go back through. And anyway, so just be a sponge right now. Try to absorb as much as you can, but don't get too stressed. So, all right. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a movies list component. So in here, let's go into File, movieslist.js. So this will be the component that will render out all of the information of that movies list that's on our state object. So inside of here, we will do our, we'll just start out with our basic, stuff you're used to. Import React component from React. All right, and we're going to go class, all right, we'll go export. No, okay, so we're going to do something tricky with the export, and so that's why I'm just going to write it like this. So movies list, so class movies list extends component. Okay, so there's our class, and we're going to go, all right, so then we got render, and then inside of here, what we're going to do is we're going to return, well, right now what we'll do is we'll just, we're just going to do our divs like that, and then we're just, in here I'm going to go type, our movie list. Okay, so there's that. I'm going to go export default movies list. Okay, so this should be pretty simple. We just created a React component, and then we're just printing out this text. That's all we're doing right here, right now. So now let's go into app.js. We're going to import that. I'm going to clean this out right here, get rid of that, and then now we're going to do import movies list from movies list. Then we'll come down in here, and we're going to go movies list like that. So this is, again, this is our entry point. This is kind of our top level app. We're going to bring in movies list, and then we're going to render it out. So let's go and see what kind of errors we have real quick. I'm sorry, not test. npm start. All right, okay, so nothing rendered. Let's look at our errors real quick. All right, expected the reducer to be a function. Okay, I think that will be taken care of. Well, actually, oh wait, reducer is assigned a value but never used. So let's go look in our Reducer file. Okay, so we need to be, we just have to export reducer. So. All right, so we're going to export our reducer. And again, that's the thing that binds everything together. Just come in and refresh our app. You see our movie list right up there at the top. Okay. It's in the center because I still have that default style sheet connected, which was centering some things. All right, so we haven't touched any of the Redux stuff now. We've set up our state object, but we haven't really done anything with it yet. So now what we're going to do is we're going to connect our state into this component. So because by default, your React components aren't going to have the Redux state object plugged into them. You're going to select which specific attributes or which specific properties off the state object that you want to inject into components. So because maybe we don't want to maybe our state object has 12 different keys on it, 12 different properties, and we don't want to give that to every single component. We only want to give the pieces of the state to the right components that are concerned with it. So right now, this movies list component, it needs to see the movies array from our state object. So our state object has the movies array on it, and now this component needs to see it. It needs to know what we like what to do with it. So what we're going to do now is we're going to connect our Redux store, or that big state object. We're going to connect that to this React component. So we're going to go import connect from React Redux. Okay. All right, and then let me just double check something real quick. All right, that should be good to go. Okay, so this connect right here is a function, and what connect does is that allows us to take properties from our state object, and so this is what our state object looks like up here. So our state object is this object, and right now it has a movies property on it that has a bunch of objects in it. Okay, so this is what our state looks like right now. So what we need to do is we need to take this movies property and we need off of our state object, and we need to pass it into this component. So the way we do that, I'm gonna hit enter a couple times to kind of get us down. All right, so what we're gonna do is with this export default instead of movies list, well, I'm gonna actually knock out the export default right now. What we're going to write is, okay, sorry, we have to back up a step. We have to make a function, and then what it does is it takes in that state object from up above, and then it allows us to control which properties we want to pass from state into this React component. So we'll go const map state to props, and then this will take the application state in as an argument. Again, this is different from component state. This takes in the state, and then we will return an object. And all the keys on this object, whatever they are, will be properties on this component. So this is actually a pretty, so we're writing this as a pretty descriptive name. We're saying take the state, and then in here we can use logic to grab stuff off of state, and then whatever we return will be passed into this component as a property. So like this dot props, and we'll be able to access it inside of here. So what we can do is we can go movies, we can go state.movies. Okay, so now that is going to, all right, that returned a bunch of stuff. So what this is going to do is that's going to then make it so this movies thing will be able to be, this movies property, our array of objects will be able to be fed into this object. So that's what this function is going to do. But right now it's just a function. This is returning an object. So we have to plug it in somewhere. And we plug it in into the connect function that we imported. So with connect, we say map state to props, and then afterwards we do another closing parenthesis and we reopen them, and then we go movies list. Okay, and then we'll go export default. All right, so what this is doing, so connect, it takes in this function, map state to props, and then what and then this right here, when this evaluates, when it simplifies down to a value, this will actually be another function. This will return a function. And then we're immediately going to invoke that function and pass in our ES6 class component, a React component, into it. And then the result of that function will return a React component that has now had the Redux state mapped into it. So once we get this all set up like this, then what that does is it makes it so now inside of movies list, we can go in and we can reference that movies property off of the state object. So I'm going to come in here and delete this. So now in here, I can go create this object, let's say, we'll just put it in right here, and we'll go this.props.movies, because that's what we said that the property will be called, and then we'll go .map. And then in here we have movie. And so this right here is just the whole mapping thing that you're used to. So, or that you were trying with when you're generating the feed in the last Twitter thing we were working on. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go this.props.movies.map movie, and then we're going to return a let's make this actually an unordered list, and then we're going to return a li that has the movie dot title. Okay, and so title, it has that because in here we have title on it. All right, and so then so we iterate over it, returns that li. Okay, so now let's peek in here. Okay, so it should have a unique key property, but there, you see that they all iterated out. We go add in our key property. So after movie, I'll take in this I, and then we'll go key I. Okay. All right, so here we go. So here's our different objects all printed out into the console. So with the reducer, again, this movies, it's just a function, it returns that. So this movies property right here, this is where we're defining what our our Redux state object will look like. Okay, how are you guys doing? All right, so so with this one, I'm going to give you the lesson plan. You guys will have that big list of nouns. There's just a lot of new vocab words that you'll be learning. There's a lot of new functions that we're pulling in that are coming out of nowhere that you have to remember. So we have like combine reducers. We have all the provider and store and stuff like that, stuff that's going on in index.js. We have our connect function that's going on in here. Okay, so so this is how we read in that array and then we're printing it out. So now the next thing we want to do is we want to make it so as we click on these, that down below we'll have a more detailed view that will display all of the detailed information about each one of these movies. So the tricky part here is that we have a we have to control how we influence that state object, how we change it. So now we need to update a property on our state object. So the first thing that we did, from the Redux state object is we just grabbed a property from it, which is this array, and we're printing it out. That's great. Now we need a way to go back and update that state object. And so the way that we're going to do this, it might seem a little convoluted because there's a couple different steps that we do, but the reason that we do it this way is it makes it more predictable, and it makes it less bug prone, and it's just a better design philosophy. Okay, so the way that we update is inside of our component. We'll detect user input, so like a click and on click, a function will be invoked, and then that will call what is called a action creator. An action creator is going to create this object, an object that's going to pass through each one of our reducers. And so if we had 50 reducers here, that one object would pass through all 50 of them. And then each one of these reducers, they'll look at the object, and then based on what the object is, they will update the state. So in our component, we'll click. So like I click on the Godfather, and then what's happening is that it's kind of like this message gets broadcast to all of the reducers. You know, if we had 50 of them, that message would be sent to all 50 reducers, and it would say like, you know, some details that we would define, stuff along the lines of like, you know, they clicked on the Godfather, you know, here's that object that they clicked on. And so then those 50 reducers, maybe 49 of them won't do anything with that information, but then one of them will take that message, and based on that message, it will change the state object. Because again, remember, the reducers determine what the state object is. And so we click on the Godfather, it sends that message out to all the reducers. We have one reducer in there that's worried about it, and so then it sees this message, and then it returns something new. It changes the state, and so then that updates that global state Redux object, and then as that state object is changed, then that will trigger a re-render in the necessary React components that will then re-render based off of that global state. Okay. So that's kind of high level. If we actually got a little diagram in here. So borrowed this from another good teacher. So we're actually following a similar type of a thing. This is I'm kind of mimicking a good tutorial that I did like a year ago, and yeah. So they did it with books. We're doing it with movies. But the idea is that, so we click on this, and we'll say these are movies. So click on one, it calls an action creator, which broadcasts and it sends these actions. And an action is just an object, just a plain JavaScript object. Those objects get fed through all the reducers automatically. It gets automatically sent to all the reducers. Don't worry about the contents of these boxes right now. But yeah, so we click. That invokes an action creator. The action creator returns an object, which is called an action. That action gets fed through all the reducers, and then the concerned reducers will update the state. And then as the state is updated, then the React components that are connected to those pieces of state will re-render on the page, and so the page will change. So that is kind of the general flow of it. Is you click, an action runs, an object is returned from the action creator. That object, that little message, is fed through all the reducers. The reducers will then update the state if they need to. As the state is updated, then the view changes. So that's the cycle. That's the big cycle that we work through to detect user input and then to change the view, the user interface based off of that input. So how do you guys, very high level, obviously you haven't written any of it yet. Or anyway, do you guys have any specific questions? Yeah, so I think what we're going to do is we'll go through this a little quick, give you guys a high-level overview, get you guys started on the project, and then what we'll do is, we'll just have a good review tomorrow morning, and we may even change this Redux project to take up, an extra day or something like that, and extend it a little bit longer, so that way you guys can, just really make sure that we're getting comfortable with this general Redux flow. Okay, so all right, so if we now go back into here, so now what we're going to do is we're going to make it so that way on our movieslist.js component, when we click on when we click on one of the movies, then we're going to send that action and that message through the reducers and change the state. Change the state of our application. So first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create our actions. So what we're going to do is we're going to go new folder. We're going to call this actions. Right now we're just going to go actions.js inside of it. So in here, this is our action creator. And again, all it's going to do is be a function that returns an object. This is going to go export const select movie, and then it's just going to return an object. Okay, so now this object right here is the action. So this whole function is called the action creator, and then the object that's being returned is called an action. That's just their design terms, like what they're calling it for this pattern. There's nothing, this is really just 100% plain JavaScript right here. All this is just a function returning an object. There's no magic going on right here. So we want the convention is that we will specify a type property on these actions. And then this is what all of the reducers will check, because this object is going to be sent to all of the reducers, 100% of the reducers. So on here, we're going to specify a type. That way in the reducers, we can test to know which reducer needs to respond to this action, because not all of the reducers will need to respond to this action. So we're going to call this movie selected. Okay, convention is to make this uppercase, and then that type is what we will check for inside of the reducers. And then payload, what this says is, so the type is movie selected, and the reducers will check for that. And if the reducer is designed to handle a movie selected action, then it's going to do something with the payload that we give it. And so the payload that we're going to give it is actually just going to be the movie object. So select movie is going to take in the movie that was clicked on, and then the payload is going to be, that's what the payload's going to be. Type will be movie selected. This object is going to be sent through all of the reducers. So now what we have to do is we have to connect this action, this function, this action creator. We have to connect it into movies list, so that way when we click, so in here on click, it will create the action and then feed it through the reducers. So we need to connect actions.js into here, and then we need to make it so that way when we invoke the function, it will automatically feed everything through to the reducers. Okay, because the reducers are what change the state object. So, all right, so now let's go in and, sorry, I'm just peeking at my notes real quick. All right, so, all right, we'll just go with this. Okay, so let me pull up just some notes that I have real quick. Okay, so first thing that we will do is let's take our, all right, so we'll take our movies list that we have, and then what we're going to do is we're now going to set it up to handle, we're going to set it up now to handle the action. So what we're going to do is we're going to go import select movie from actions. Okay, so that's going to go into actions. Again, grab that. Oh, I need to not call this actions.js. I need to call this index.js, and then now it can be, oh, okay, all right, anyway, we'll have to, oh, that's right, I did not put this inside of a, there we go. Okay, that's right, so we're not inside of another folder yet. Okay, so, all right, so select movie is, so that's going to get back that. Right now, that's just a plain JavaScript function, and then we're going to go import bind action creators from Redux. Okay, so there's another Redux method that we're bringing in, and this will allow us to take this select movie function and make it so that when we call it, what it returns will get fed through all of the reducers. So again, user clicks on something in here, we call the action creator. The action creator returns an object. The object is fed through all of the reducers. Those reducers update the state. Again, that is the flow. I'm just going to kind of keep repeating that. So now what we have to do is we have to go, oh, go ahead. That hasn't been typed out yet. Yes. Yeah, so we'll be, sorry, that has not been implemented yet. We'll be doing that in just a second. Okay. All right, so now, just like we have map state to props, there's another function we're going to create to connect the actions. So we did this to make it so that way the state properties could come into the function. Now what we need to do is we need to connect our action creator to our component in a way that it triggers the reducers. Because right now, if we invoke select movie, it's just a function that returns an object and then nothing else happens in our application. We need to wire this in so that way when we call select movie, whatever it returns will automatically get fed through the reducers. And so we need to make that connection now. We have to connect select movie to the reducers. And we do that with a function that we're going to call map dispatch to props. Okay, so we're making this is a function, it will be a callback function that we're going to feed into our connect down below. And so in this function, and again, it doesn't have to be called map dispatch to props, and this doesn't have to be called map state to props, but that's just those variable names can help us understand what's going on. So in here, we're going to go returned, and then this is bind action creators. That's what came in from Redux. And again, sorry guys, this is just a lot of learning the new functions, playing around with it, and then this will, sink in a little more. So it's a lot of new stuff. But we're going to go select movie, and then we're going to pass in the select movie function that we imported. So what this means is that the result of all this will be that select movie will be a all right, okay, so now it's finished up, so it takes a dispatch. So the result of this is that on props, we will have a select movie function that will be this function, but then it will automatically be bound and tied in with all of the reducers. Okay, so there's map dispatch to props, and now to connect that into here, we go map dispatch to props. So now we have map state to props, map dispatch to props, and then we have movies list. Okay, so then what happens here, again, with all of this is that anyway, this makes it so it takes the function that comes in, it connects it with all the Redux stuff behind the scenes, it does some magic, and then it passes it in as a property. So there's kind of some magic going on here in this line, and so it's more about needing to understand kind of the high level what's occurring there. So, all right, so if we now come in here for this dot props, what we can do is, well, I'll keep the caret up on the other line, but I'm going to break this out a little bit so it's a little easier to read. All right, so we have our key, and then right here we're going to go on click. So now we're going to set up our on click, and then we're going to go this dot props. Well, actually, we're going to pass it in inside of a callback function, or inside of a arrow function, because we need to pass arguments to the select movie method. But then we can go this dot props dot select movie, and then we're going to pass in the movie that comes from here. Okay, all right, so I know this is kind of a lot, but let's go in now. Let's look at our action creator. So before we return all of this, what we're going to do is we're going to go console.log, and then we're going to go movie. All right, let's take a look at this. I think got everything wired up, so that should respond appropriately. There. So I click on the Godfather, and now you see this right here was logged from our action creator. And so that's showing us the Godfather object. And then, so what's happening is inside of this action creator, it takes an object that will be of type movie selected, and then it will have payload of movie. Okay, and so movie again is that movie object, so the Godfather object. And so now this object is going to be fed through our reducers. Right here in movies, we're not handling it. This movies reducer is just returning an array. We don't intend to change it or update it with props that are coming in. So this one is just pretty static. So, but active movie, this is the one that is going to, we're going to handle and look at the action that comes in, and based off of the information on there, we're going to update the state. So now let's look at our active movie reducer. So inside of here, we're going to go export, default, make a function, and then, so we just export our function, just like we did with movies. It's just a function that will return a piece of the state. But then this one, we're going to set it up to take 2 arguments. So we have our state property. So this is, if you remember, each reducer is responsible for one property on this on our state object. So in here, let's go. What were we going to call it? Well, okay. So actually, let's do first thing. We'll go import active movie from active movie. Okay, active movie is what we're going to call it. All right, so we're importing our active movie reducer. So we're going to go active movie will be active movie. Okay, so this active movie reducer is now assigned to this active movie property. Okay, so anyway, so now let's go finish up the active movie property. So again, this is a function that is responsible for that active movie property on the state object. So inside of here, we take in state property, so this is the existing state, the existing value for that property. And so it's, so this one right here, state property, is going to refer to active movie. So the active movie property. So state prop is whatever value is the active movie property when this is called. And then action, this is that little action object that was created that's now getting fed through. All right, so now in here we're going to make a switch statement. So switch is it's kind of the convention. You create a switch is kind of is generally the convention for within reducers. So we're going to check action.type, and then if it is movie selected, then we're going to return action.payload. And action.payload, if you remember, was that Godfather object. So it was the Godfather object, and so we're returning that here. And then we also need to specify a default. So in case in the future as we expand this, what are we going to do? What are we going to do if we don't care about the action that comes in? Because most of the time the actions that come in, this particular reducer won't care about it. If we had like 50 reducers, for any given action, most of the reducers won't care what that action is. So this movie reducer, okay, so movie selected checks that. If the action type is not movie selected, then we're just going to return the property that was already there. We're also going to set this equal to null as a default value, because these action creators get run when the application boots up to get the first initial starting value. And if we return it undefined, because state prop will be undefined initially, then that will cause an error. But Ty, so you had a question? Good. Yep. Yeah, kind of like a linked list almost, so you kind of think of it that way. Yeah, so it's like the components that are down the line, down on the bottom, and when they have an action creator, it's kind of like, instead of them directly controlling and changing the state, it's like they shout out. They say, this action happened, and this is the payload that comes with it. Anyone who cares, you can handle this information and do what you want with it. It's like this public announcement to the whole application. So like the action creator, it broadcasts out to all the reducers, and then the reducers, they can all handle it in any way that they want to handle it. Cool. All right. Yeah, and it's doing this in a very organized way, and it makes it so that the actual React components, they don't directly change the application state, the Redux state, which makes it secure. It makes it harder to get bugs, because if you just had 100 components all nested in crazy ways and they're all randomly just reaching in and changing stuff on the state object, it could be really hard to predict what's happening or like how it's changing. Anyway, so this is just a very go ahead. Yeah. And so this allows, it's just a very controlled, and it's a little regimented. And so you might think like, this is like, holy cow, I'm just trying to change a property on an object and I have to like change 5 files to do it. It's just this puts in a lot of structure, and it allows us to do it in a very secure way from a code stability standpoint. So it makes it so our application can scale well without, getting lots of bugs, because it's amazing how complex it gets when you have 20 developers working on the application, and you have 200 components that, it can get pretty hairy. So, and again, I'll get this up on the video, and I'm just gonna, I know we're into the dinner time real quick, but I'm just gonna walk through kind of that last step for, from then reading in the updated state. So right now everything is wired in to where it everything is wired in now to where it correctly would update the state. Now we just need to, let's just create our second movie detail component, and then we'll display the detail. So that's going to be kind of a review of movie list real quick. And so let's do, actually, you know what? Let's, I think I might actually do, okay. All right, here's what we're going to do. I'm actually going to push this project up to GitHub. You guys are going to clone this down, and then what you guys are going to work on after dinner is you're going to create the movie detail component that has Redux and everything tied into it that will display the information. So that's what I'm going to have you guys work on after dinner, and and we'll I think that will be, because we've covered all of the new concepts, so you can come back and review this video, and then we'll have you guys work on the movie detail part after dinner, and then we'll have another project from scratch where you will build all this from scratch. So hopefully, kind of after dinner, you guys can work on this for a little bit. I would like you guys to pair on this part of it tonight at least. Still going to determine whether or not you guys will pair for the full project, but for tonight, I want you guys to pair on adding in the movie detail component. Okay. Then real quick, if you're looking at the notes in Slack, you'll see a thing called a container. So most of your React components will not connect to Redux. They will look just like normal, plain React components that you've seen, that we've been working with over the last couple days. But the components where we do this connect thing, we call those containers. They're the smart components. They're connected to Redux. They have a direct connection to the state object that's managed by Redux. The containers are re-rendered when the application state changes. So when when this object that's defined here, when it gets changed, then the containers will be re-rendered appropriately. And then so map state to props, connect. That's how you connect those things together. So I want you guys to create a movie detail component that's a container that reads in the the active movie property from the state and displays it. Okay? All right. So I will push this up to GitHub. I'll put a little description in the README, just so it's, this is kind of like your little warm-up project for the homework. So hopefully with this, you guys can start to understand the overall approach to the application. And then for your homework, you'll build a Redux application from scratch. Something fairly simple. Okay. All right, any questions? Okay. All right, great. So yeah, head to dinner, and then when you get back from dinner, this will be up, and then yeah, then you guys will work on this, and then let me know if you have any questions, and then yeah, and then what we'll do is tomorrow morning, I think, is when we'll first thing we'll break into the next project, and building it from scratch. We'll work through that tomorrow, and yeah, I think that'll put you in a good spot. The project for this time is going to be pretty simple. No CSS at all. It's not styling or mocking something else. It's just you're going to be building a to-do list, essentially. And this is kind of the starting tutorial from that Redux uses on their site. And so you can use that as a reference, but essentially I want you to use this practice project kind of as a sample, as for some code samples, and then you're going to be building out a functioning to-do list where you can enter in a new to-do list item in the input, and then add it, and then anyway, well, yeah. So that'll be written up. So this will be kind of your first thing you'll work on tonight. Tomorrow you'll work through that to-do list. Okay, so this is cool stuff. This might be the hardest thing of the entire course, I think. And in my opinion, I think that this Redux stuff is pretty tricky. I mean, unless, I don't know, the sorting algorithms and the data structures and stuff can get pretty tricky too. But yeah, maybe I say that. Maybe I'm just going to keep changing that. So I would put this a little bit higher in difficulty than the data structures stuff. But yeah, it should be downhill from here, right? We'll see. All right, unless there's some other hidden hardest things of the course. But okay, great. So I'll push this up, update the README, give you some basic instructions on it, and then we'll move from there. Okay. Have a good lunch, guys. Dinner. Yes.